"Grandma, don't wear your red coat today." That's what my grandson said that morning. I laughed, thinking he was just being silly. But later, oh Lord, I understood why. I still remember how cold that day was. The sky had that heavy, gray kind of sadness hanging over it. I wore my favorite red coat, bright, bold, and full of memories. It was the coat I wore the day I buried my husband. Strange, isn't it? How certain clothes hold pieces of our past as if the fabric remembers what our hearts try to forget. When I stepped outside, I felt something uneasy in the air. You ever had that feeling? Like the world's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I didn't listen to that voice inside me. I just brushed it off like I always did. I've spent a lifetime ignoring what my spirit tried to tell me. I walked to the corner store, the same one I've been going to for 20 years. I smiled at old Mr. Davis behind the counter, bought a carton of milk, and started walking home. And then it happened. A car came speeding down the street, windows tinted, music blaring. Someone shouted something I couldn't make out the words. Then I heard the gunshots. 3 of them. Loud, sharp, too close. I hit the ground. My red coat flared out like a signal, a flag of fire in the gray morning. People screamed. I remember the sound of tires peeling away. And as I lay there, heart pounding, my grandson's words echoed in my head. "Grandma, don't wear your red coat today." That was the moment everything in my life changed. Not because I was hit, I wasn't. But because I realized how close I'd come to leaving this world without saying the things that needed to be said. Without forgiving. Without letting go. That red coat became more than just a coat. It became a warning. A second chance. A voice from God saying, "You still have time, but not forever." After that day, I couldn't stop shaking. Every loud sound felt like another gunshot. But what really haunted me wasn't the shooting. It was the memories that came rushing back. The man I lost. The love I buried long before he ever left this earth. My husband, Marcus, he was a good man. Flawed, yes. Stubborn, proud, and quiet, but his heart. Oh, his heart was gold. He used to call me Asterisk his fire, because I always wore red. Red lipstick, red scarves, that same red coat. He said it made me look like I was carrying the sun on my shoulders. Maybe that's why I couldn't let it go. We met when I was 22, in a small church choir on the south side. He played the piano. I sang like I had wings. We didn't have much, just a tiny apartment and a dream. But we had each other. And sometimes that's all 2 souls need to build a whole world. Then life. It started to pull us apart. Bills, children, long hours, missed birthdays. He started drinking just a little at first, then more. And me. I turned my love into anger. You ever love someone so hard it starts to hurt? That was me. I wanted him to fight his demons, but I didn't realize I was fighting my own. The night he died, it wasn't peaceful. We'd argued. I told him to sleep on the couch. And he did. When I woke up the next morning, he was gone. A silent heart attack in his sleep. And I never got to say I was sorry. That's the kind of pain that stains your soul. For years, I carried that guilt like a chain around my neck. Every time I put on that red coat, I could almost feel his hands buttoning it for me like he used to. Every time the wind touched my face, I'd hear his piano playing in the distance. It's funny how grief doesn't shout. It whispers. It waits. And it finds you when you think you've moved on. That's why the shooting shook me so deeply. Not because I almost died, but because I realized I've been half dead for years already. Walking through life, wrapped in a red memory, afraid to forgive myself. That night, I sat by my window, staring at that coat. And I whispered, "Marcus, I miss you, but I need to stop dying with you." That was the first time in 20 years, I finally cried. After Marcus passed, the house got too quiet. The piano stopped playing. The laughter faded. And somewhere in that silence, my children learned to live without me. I had 2 Raymond and Denise, my babies. They were only teenagers when their daddy died, and I was too broken to see their pain. I thought I was protecting them by being strong, by keeping busy, by not crying. But I see now I was just building walls. Walls so high even love couldn't climb over them. Raymond left home at 18. He said, "Mama, I can't breathe in this house anymore." And he was right. The air was thick with grief I never spoke about. We didn't argue much. We just stopped talking. You ever lose someone who's still alive? That's what it felt like. Denise tried to stay close, bless her heart. She'd visit with her little boy, my sweet grandson, Jamal, the same one who warned me about the red coat. But I could tell, even she was careful around me. Like I might break if she said the wrong thing. And maybe I would have. One day she asked, "Mama, why don't you ever talk about Daddy?" And I said, "Because it hurts too much." She looked at me with those sad grown-up eyes and said, "Mama, it hurts more when you don't." That was the day I realized silence doesn't protect us. It poisons us. So I started talking, slowly, awkwardly. I told Denise about her daddy's laughter, his music, his dreams. And she cried not because she missed him, but because she finally got to know him again. Through me. Now, I see my mistakes for what they were, not failures but fears. I was scared to love too much, to lose too much, to feel too much. But love, it doesn't go away when you hide it. It just waits, like my children did, like God did. That red coat still hangs by the door. But now, when I see it, I don't see blood or sorrow. I see second chances, and I whisper, "Thank you, Lord, for giving me one more day to love them right." That night the rain came down hard. You know that kind of rain that doesn't just fall? It asterisk weeps asterisk. It felt like the whole sky was crying for me. And for the first time in years I didn't fight it. I just let myself feel everything. I sat by the window, that same red coat hanging by the door like a ghost of who I used to be. The house was quiet. The only sound was the storm and my heartbeat. And in that silence, I finally said the words I'd been holding in my soul for too long. "God, I'm tired of pretending I'm okay." I told him everything. About Marcus, about the anger, the guilt, the loneliness. I even told him about the day I almost got shot, and how I thought it was supposed to be my punishment. But then, something strange happened. Right there in that small living room, I felt warmth. Not from the heater, not from the light. From inside me. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't thunder or lightning. It was just a soft knowing like God whispering, "My child, I never left you. You just stopped listening." And I broke. Completely. I cried until there was nothing left but truth. Every wall I built, every lie I told myself, it all fell away. I wasn't the strong woman I pretended to be. I was a scared little girl, begging her father to hold her. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I forgave myself. Out loud. I said, "Lord, I forgive me for being human." And you know what? It didn't fix everything, but it freed me. That night I slept for the first time, really slept. No nightmares, no regrets chasing me through my dreams. Just peace. And when I woke up the next morning, I looked at that red coat, and I didn't see death anymore. I saw deliverance. Maybe forgiveness doesn't erase the past. Maybe it just teaches your heart how to carry it without breaking. The morning after that storm, the world felt new. The air smelled like clean earth, and the light coming through my window was soft like grace itself. For the first time in years, I made myself a real breakfast. Eggs, toast, black coffee. Simple things, but they tasted like peace. I turned on some old records Marcus used to love. Bill Withers, Aretha, a little Sam Cooke. Their voices filled the house like warm honey. And I laughed, not because something was funny, but because I could finally feel asterisk again. I started walking to the park every morning. At first, I kept my head down, afraid to meet eyes with anyone. But after a while, I began to look around. There was an old man who fed pigeons every day at the same bench. A young mother chasing her daughter through the grass. A couple holding hands like they'd just fallen in love. And I thought, asterisk, maybe life isn't done with me yet. One day, I sat beside that old man. He smiled and said, "You used to walk by here, but never looked up." And I said, "I had too much sadness in my eyes." He nodded. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Sadness don't scare people, ma'am. Silence does." He was right. So I started talking again. To strangers, to neighbors, to God. Even to Marcus sometimes in my own quiet way. Not with grief, but with gratitude. Because I finally understood that love doesn't die when people do. It changes shape. It moves from their hands to your heart. One Sunday, Denise and Jamal came over for dinner. I cooked fried chicken and collard greens just like the old days. We laughed, told stories, even played a little music. And when Jamal hugged me goodnight, he said, "Grandma, I like your red coat again." I smiled, touched his cheek, and whispered, "Me too, baby. Me too." That night, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset burn gold and red across the sky. And I thought maybe God was painting the world in my colors again. Not to remind me of pain, but to show me that even after the storm, red still means life. It's funny how once you start healing, the world begins to notice. People who used to just pass me on the street now stop to talk. They say, "Miss Johnson, you look different." And I smile and tell them, "Honey, peace'll do that to you." One morning I went down to the community center just to drop off some books. But somehow, I ended up staying for hours. There was a young mother there, crying in the corner. Said her man had left, and she didn't know how to keep going. And before I even thought about it, I sat beside her, took her hand, and told her my story. I told her about Marcus, about grief, about guilt. But I also told her about grace, how it finds you when you stop running, how forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing peace over pain. By the time I finished, she was still crying, but now her tears were lighter, like rain that knows the sun is coming. That day, something inside me shifted. I realized my pain had a purpose. All those years I thought were wasted, they were really just preparing me. preparing me to listen, to understand, to be the voice I once needed to hear. So I started volunteering, helping women who'd lost their husbands, their homes, or just their hope. We'd sit in a circle every Thursday night drinking tea and telling the truth. No pretending, no shame, just real talk from real hearts. And sometimes, in the middle of those stories, we'd laugh so hard we forgot how to cry. That's healing too. One evening, after everyone left, I stayed behind to clean up. The janitor, an old man with tired eyes, stopped and said, "Ma'am, whatever you're doing in here, it's working. I hear laughter coming out this room again." I smiled and said, "That's not me, baby. That's life finding its way back." When I walked home that night, the sky was dark, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The red coat around my shoulders felt lighter now, like it had finally forgiven me too. And I thought to myself, maybe we're all just coats in God's closet, carrying stories, waiting for someone brave enough to wear us again. I always knew the day would come when I had to face my son again. But knowing something and being ready for it, those are two different things. Raymond hadn't been home in almost 10 years. 10 Christmases, 10 birthdays. 10 years of silence between a mother and her boy. One Sunday afternoon, Denise called me and said, "Mama, Raymond's in town. He wants to see you." My heart started pounding like it used to when I heard gunshots. Not from fear of him, but from fear of the truth. Because I knew, when he looked at me, he'd see the woman who failed him. That evening, I sat on my porch, wearing that red coat, waiting. When his car pulled up, I saw the man he'd become taller, stronger, older. But his eyes, they were still that same little boy's eyes, the ones that used to look for comfort and found none. He walked up slow, hands in his pockets, and said, "Hey, Ma." And for a second I forgot how to breathe. I whispered, "Hey, baby," just like I used to. But this time my voice cracked not from age, but from truth. We sat there in silence for a while, listening to the wind. Finally, he said, "I used to hate that red coat. You know why?" I shook my head, because it reminded me of the day you stopped hugging me. You wrapped yourself in that thing and never came back out. Tears filled my eyes. I said, "Baby, I didn't know how to love you without breaking." He looked down, his jaw tight, then whispered, "And I didn't know how to forgive you without remembering." That's when I realized we were both carrying the same pain, just on different sides. I reached for his hand. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he let me. And in that touch, trembling, quiet, and raw, I felt 10 years of silence begin to melt. We talked until the sky turned purple, and the streetlights came on. Not about the past, not really. Just about now, about life, about how sorry we both were. And when he stood up to leave, he hugged me. Longer than he ever did as a child. He said, "You still smell like home, Ma." And I whispered, "You still are, baby." When he drove away, I sat there crying not from sadness this time, but from relief. Because forgiveness had finally found its way home. After Raymond left that night, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of echoes, of forgiveness, of something I hadn't felt in years. Peace didn't just visit me that evening. It moved in. And I promised myself I wouldn't ever let it go. The next morning I woke up before the sun. I made coffee and stood on the porch, watching the sky bloom pink and gold. For the first time, I didn't rush my thoughts. I didn't hide from the memories. I just stood there breathing. And I realized something. Healing doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes quiet, like the dawn. That week, I started writing again. Little stories. Letters to Marcus. Notes to God. Things I used to be too afraid to put into words. Each page felt like another piece of my soul finding its way home. And soon, I began sharing them with the women at the center, with Denise, even with Raymond. One Sunday, our church pastor asked me to speak at the women's group. I almost said no. But something inside whispered, "Tell them." So I did. I told them about the red coat, about guilt, about the night I almost died and how God turned that moment into a beginning. By the time I finished, the whole room was crying. But not from sorrow, from hope. Afterward, a young girl came up to me and said, "Miss Johnson, your story sounds like mine. Except I'm still in the middle of it." I hugged her tight and said, "Baby, don't worry about the middle. God writes the best endings." That night, I looked at the red coat hanging by the door. The fabric had faded a little, soft from years of wear. But to me, it was more beautiful than ever. It wasn't just cloth and thread anymore. It was memory, mercy, and meaning, all stitched together by grace. Sometimes I think maybe the coat saved my life that day. Or maybe it just gave me a reason to start living it. The years after that, they were quiet. Not empty, just gentle. Like a song that's finally found its last note. I moved to a smaller house near the lake. Nothing fancy, just a porch big enough for my rocking chair in the morning light. Every sunrise felt like a promise kept. Every sunset, a prayer answered. Raymond visited often. Sometimes with his wife, sometimes with my grandkids, 2 little firecrackers who light up my world. They run through the grass, laughing, shouting, "Grandma, look." And every time I see them, I whisper a little thank you. Because there was a time I thought I'd never see joy again. I still wear the red coat sometimes, not because I need to, but because it reminds me of who I was and who I became. It reminds me that survival isn't the same as living. And that living means opening your heart, even when it's been broken before. On rainy days, I sit by the window and think about Marcus. I wonder what he'd say if he saw me now. Calm, smiling, free. I think he'd be proud. He'd probably laugh and say, "Took you long enough, woman." And I'd laugh too, because he'd be right. Some nights, I talk to God like he's sitting right next to me. I don't ask for much anymore. Just peace for my family and a little more time to love them right. Because love, that's the only thing that never grows old. If you'd told me years ago that I'd find peace, I'd have laughed in your face. But now, I know peace doesn't come from forgetting the past. It comes from forgiving it. And that forgiveness, it's the most beautiful sound in the world. It's the sound of your soul coming home. If you've listened this far, thank you. You've walked with me through the rain, through the pain, through the silence. And maybe you've seen a little of yourself in my story. I'm 60 now. The mirror shows the lines, the years, the stories written on my face. But I don't hide from them anymore. Each wrinkle is a chapter. Each scar a lesson I survived. Sometimes people ask me, "Miss Johnson, if you could go back, what would you change?" And I tell them, nothing. Not one thing. Because every mistake, every heartbreak, every tear, they all carved a path that led me here. To peace, to love, to grace. You know, that red coat still hangs by my door. I don't wear it often now, but I touch it sometimes before I go out. It reminds me of a little boy's warning, of a day I almost didn't make it home, and of the life that grew from that moment. I used to think that coat was a curse. Bright red, impossible to ignore, like a wound you couldn't hide. But now I see it was never meant to hide me. It was meant to help me stand out, to be seen, to remind me that I'm still here, still breathing, still becoming. So, if you're listening, wherever you are, and you feel like your life has lost its color, remember this. Sometimes God doesn't take away the storm. He just teaches you how to dance in the rain. And when the rain stops, and the light returns, you'll realize you were never really alone. That's my story. My red coat story. It began with fear, and ended with peace. And if that's all I leave behind in this world, then it's enough. Thank you for listening. Now go and wear your own red coat, proudly.